Yo, molweni bethunana, dumelani, amacheroni, ndiyathemba ni-right emakhaya wherever you are. I hope you all are good. So yeah, today I've decided on a big topic. Something that probably affects at least almost everyone in this country, whether directly or indirectly. Yeah, the big three alphabets of the century, or the decade rather, GBV, gender-based violence. It's been on and off on everyone's lips for a long time, and then it goes quiet. Like everything in this country, we treat it as a trend. Something big happens, we go crazy, and then we go silent, which is a big problem for me because it has a big impact on our society, and to an outsider it's a reflection of where we are as a society. So truly speaking, we have to deal with it. Now, first of all, let me present a scenario to you that might help you understand my perspective. Say you find yourself in a state of illness, chronic illness. Let's say maybe, for example, you have tuberculosis. But instead of having to take the 2-week treatment, you now have ilendo. You are now forced to take the treatment for the rest of your life. And as long as you're taking the treatment, you are fine. But as soon as you stop the treatment, you start getting ill again. And then when you take the treatment again, you are fine. Which is my issue with gender-based violence, because it seems like we are hoping for a magic pill for an issue that requires cultural change within us. Because I'm not gonna lie, GBV, it stems from an archaic patriarchal society, system of society, which is what most African nations are, a patriarchy. And we know that in previous years, women's voices were sort of silenced in a lot of spheres. So it was easy to get away with violence against women. So in this day and age, when everything is all out in the open, we sort of are confronted with the problem directly. And my issue with this is society does not seem to know how to handle it. Because here's the first thing. If you ever went to a doctor and told them you have shortness of breath, you are losing weight, you don't have an appetite, you've been coughing for 2 weeks, if that doctor gave you cough syrup, vitamin pills, and flu medication, you would ask to check that doctor's credentials. Because that person is treating symptoms, not the disease or the illness. Clearly you have some bigger illness. You have a perpetual cough that has lasted for 2 weeks. That's an indicator of something. Weight loss, appetite loss, and yet this doctor is treating the symptoms, which is what we are doing with GBV. Because think about the fact that all information available out there is geared towards, number one, helping the victim, which is a good thing. I don't know if it's effective or not, but that's a good thing. It's geared towards understanding the victim. We have so many stories about the victim that a person could sit at home right now, go on Google, and establish a victim profile, and establish a profile of your typical GBV victim. And throughout all these outreach programs, we've come to understand that a lot of GBV victims are not necessarily people who are introverts, who are quiet, who have shrinked their personalities. Sometimes it's people with big personalities and whatnot. It's not necessarily the stereotypical person you'd expect, someone with low self-esteem, someone who hides themselves. You know, you have an understanding of the victim because of all these outreach programs and all these testimonials from victims. My issue is the fact that if we dedicate so many resources towards treating the victim, what are we doing? What are we really doing? Because with any other crime, the police would take the statement of the victim and they'd go to counseling and that's it. Maybe they'll testify in court or whatever, but the person that the police would focus on is the perpetrator. There are no stats on victims of hijackings. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. We don't get into victimology of the person who was hijacked. We look to understand the hijacker so that we can be better able to trace them. You understand what I'm saying? The criminal justice system is geared at preventing hijackings. We are not so much focused on the victims. So why is it that when it comes to GBV, the focus is on the victim? We are rehabilitating the victim and letting the perpetrator go. If you go online right now and you Google GBV offenders list, you'll get a sex offenders list. You won't get a GBV offenders list. The government has a sex offenders list. If you go to the State of the Nation website and you look for a GBV offenders list, it's crammed somewhere within the sex offenders list, which tells you that there are no resources dedicated to establishing a specialized GBV offenders list, which is where the problem starts. If we agree that the source of the problem is offenders, then why don't we have an offenders list? And the hilarious part is actually treating the problem would not even be expensive, because if someone is arrested for GBV offenses, the law, if we were geared towards understanding the perpetrator more, the law would then actually include into legislature court-mandated therapy for the offender, which gives us an insight into the offender. Anger management, whatever, but it gives us an insight into the offender. And here's the cherry on top. Force that person to pay for that therapy. Make that person pay for those therapy sessions. But we don't. The person gets arrested, goes to jail, comes out. No counseling, no therapy, nothing. Nothing whatsoever. We don't understand the perpetrator. We have little to no information about the perpetrator. And here is where the problem gets worse. Conventional media and social media have taken to demonizing the perpetrator, giving you a perception of this monstrous, evil person who does not know joy, who does not laugh. And in most cases, they tell you that a lot of GBV cases involve alcohol consumption. Maybe I'm the only one raising my hand, but I know that there are people out there who are GBV offenders who are not also alcohol consumers or alcoholics, who are not evil people People that we trust, people that we know, our brothers, our cousins, our uncles, our fathers even. These are people that we know and trust. In certain instances, it's people that you consider as your role models, people who have achieved a lot in life. And it becomes hard to picture that person as a GBV offender because you have that psyche that has been presented by media of this horrible person, of this evil person. So how can you perceive that someone you know and trust and care for, who has all these good qualities, could be a perpetrator of GBV? How could that be possible if media presents you this image of this person? Which is a big problem because in that case, a lot of us are looking for the monster. We're not looking for the human being who is also a perpetrator of violence against their spouse. We're looking for the monster. And you're not going to find the monster that you're looking for. You're going to find a human being with flaws. If maybe we geared more resources towards understanding the perpetrator and giving the perpetrator a platform to speak, we would understand the perpetrator more, is what I'm saying. The fact that there is no specialized GBV offenders list is it's an atrocity. That one is an atrocity. Ladies, it tells you where your government is at, basically. Here is another thing that I find hard when it comes to GBV. Anytime there is this serious incident that goes viral also on social media, the whole status quo turns around and says men are trash, men are dogs, men are all of this. As someone who is sitting at home, who does not put their hands on women, you are alienating me. You're turning me into an enemy, and at the same time you want me to participate in the conversation, which in most cases is a one-sided conversation. In most cases, think about your radio stations, your TV programs, even these outreach programs. You find that it's a one-sided conversation about getting to know victims and survivors of GBV. There's no platform for any other opinion. There's no platform for someone to say, hey guys, maybe if we looked at the problem in this manner, we would understand the problem more. And that's the reality, and that's the biggest problem. The fact that we are expected to participate in a one-sided conversation, like a lot of aspects of society. How do I participate in a conversation where I'm a villain before I even step into the conversation, where I'm vilified before I even engage in the conversation? A one-sided conversation, by the way, that is hosted by people who are, I don't want to say victims, but who have the potential, not potential, but who are at risk of becoming victims. I once had this conversation with some family members, and they pointed out something that made me think, okay, maybe let me take a step back. They said that in most cases, the perpetrator will speak long before the victim does, to friends or their brothers or whatnot. But here's the thing. That's rare for me. I've never had someone come to me and say, I've never had that instance. Because I would think that someone who is abusive would want to isolate that person, to cut off all avenues all external avenues of communication for that person. Again, the fact that we as a society are at loggerheads when it comes to this issue, it shows you that we have pushed a lot of resources in the wrong direction. Yeah, I'm not gonna apologize for saying that. We've pushed resources in the wrong direction. We've allocated so many resources to understanding and hearing stories from victims. Meanwhile, we let the perpetrators go scot-free. You get arrested, you go to jail, you come out, no rehabilitation, nothing. They just get to go on with their lives. There's no stamp on their forehead that says offender or perpetrator. There's no list for women to be able to protect themselves. We just let the perpetrator go free without understanding them, without seeing things from their perspective, because the reality is, in order to understand someone who is engaged in a behavior that is not acceptable to society, we need to understand things from that person's point of view so that we can understand why they do what they do. And that becomes a problem because even questions that give you an insight into that person are sort of taboo. Like asking someone who is a victim of GBV, what did you do? You see, that question right there, it sounds like victim blaming. And that's because in a lot of cases when society asks that question, it is victim blaming. It's assigning blame to the victim. Meanwhile, that question is supposed to be simply, where did the conversation start? Because no act of violence is abrupt. It never comes out of nowhere. It has to have a beginning. Most acts of violence are conversations that escalated in the wrong direction. So if maybe in a perfect world, when you ask that question, maybe the person would tell you, I bought myself a dress, I applied for school, I did this, I went out with friends. I'm not saying that that is what happens in most cases, but I'm just saying, in a perfect world, if you ask that question and got the answer, you would get to understand, oh, okay, maybe your partner was feeling insecure because you decided to improve yourself educationally. This person feels insecure. They think you're going to leave them. We'd get an insight into the perpetrator through the victim if we didn't demonize the question, what did you do? I don't know if you get what I'm saying. It's even hard to ask where it began. You understand what I'm saying? How did the conversation start? Because most acts of violence are conversations that escalate. That is the biggest problem with me, the fact that we can't engage in the conversation without risking sounding as if we are blaming the victim. That's one aspect. Another aspect is the fact that maybe a lot of people are going to take this the wrong way, but gender-based violence is not necessarily violence against women. It doesn't end there. There are also a lot of men that are affected by GBV, but their cases go unreported because they don't go to the police stations and whatnot. So please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there are as many cases of men who are victims of GBV, nor am I saying that there are more cases of men who are victims of GBV. All I'm simply saying is that there are a lot more unreported cases of GBV against men than we know of, which now tells you ukuba the problem is a lot bigger than we think. It's a matter of cases that have not been reported. So we have underreported stats on the issue. That's one of the aspects. The second one is the fact that if you think about GBV and you really take your time, we lack the dispassionate analysis that it would take to properly understand the problem. Anytime you spark this conversation, it will always be met with a passionate, let me say, personalized response, which is an issue because if I'm trying to understand how you feel or how you see the problem, and your approach is sort of a personalized approach, it's hard for me to understand where you're coming from. And it's hard for you to hear me because you bring anger into the conversation. You've personalized the issue, which is a big problem because we need to have this conversation. We cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid the topic of GBV. And as long as it's a one-sided affair, we are not getting anywhere. Because if you included everyone, you would find people like me who would tell you GBV in itself is a symptom of a bigger problem. And that problem is our complacency to violence in this country. It's our desensitization to violence. Let me give you a prime example. Most people who see two men fighting in the street will either take out their camera phones and take a video, or keep walking or watch, unless they know those people personally. If they don't know those people personally, they'll just watch until one person wins the fight, and then they praise that person for winning the fight. They give that person positive reaffirmation for actually winning that fight. What is that positive reaffirmation saying? Good job. You are actually saying to this person, good job for engaging in this violent behavior. Here is a thing that people don't consider. Violence does not categorize according to gender. If a person is used to getting their way through violence, they are not going to categorize it according to gender. When they get home and they get into an argument with their significant other and the conversation escalates, eventually they'll use violence because society has been reaffirming this behavior. So if we dedicated a lot more resources to cultural change within society, to changing the culture of accepting violence in society, we would maybe get somewhere. We would be moving in a positive direction. But we are not, because we are treating GBV as the problem. Meanwhile, it's a symptom of a larger problem, our acceptance of violence. Even if you see two kids fighting, two boys fighting, you are less inclined to see that as a serious issue. But they'll grow up with that violence. I don't know if maybe I'm headed in the right direction with this conversation. But the sooner we start opening non-discriminatory platforms of engagement with this issue, and we stop making certain sectors of society feel as if they are outside of this conversation, the sooner we can have a meaningful and honest conversation with each other. That's where we can start to actually have an impactful conversation. When we stop excluding certain people in society, and when we stop demonizing the perpetrators, and we genuinely get to know who the perpetrators are and get to understand their mindset, the sooner we can start accurately profiling a lot of perpetrators and saying, hey, don't expect to see an evil person when you think GBV perpetrator. It might be someone like this, it might be someone like that. It's not necessarily gonna be this evil person, which I think is also what a lot of women expect. Women who have never been victims of GBV, they probably expect someone who is this evil person. Because in most cases, even if you watch like movies and stuff like that, you see this person who started out being this charming personality or whatever, and then they switched. Out of the blue, they switched. Either after marriage or whatnot. But here is the reality. People don't stop being who they are. They just reveal a part of themselves that they've kept hidden because they, in their mind, know that this is not acceptable within society. They know that you would not accept them if they showed you outright, well, nah, I'm a violent person. So the sooner we stop having this misconception of perpetrators of GBV and start genuinely trying to understand the perpetrator, the sooner society actually can know what to look for. Ladies, if you are out there, because this is honestly a very sensitive topic. If you are out there and you are going through verbal or physical abuse, just know that there are platforms out there that could offer you resources. Check the first comments below. Probably the only comments. I don't know why people are not commenting. But anyway, just check the first comments. I'll put out the list of organizations down on that list. Also, check out a lot of 5FM podcasts. They talk a lot about Ilendo, GBV, and combating it. Even though I am not satisfied with where society is headed with this issue, I will say one thing: at least we are not burying our heads in the sand. At least we're not burying our hands in the sand. Anyway, hit that subscribe button. Please comment, like, and share. This is AV, and you are watching Disturbing the Peace. Peace out. If there's anyone out there who felt like this was helpful to them, or anyone out there who is in the situation I'm talking about, please speak out. There are people out there that care for you, that would want to help you. Please speak out. Confide in friends or family. Seek help before it's too late. Thanks, guys. Cheers.